Welcome to another edition of the News Navigators with me, Jeremy Deacon.
And me, Jonathan Starling.
I think, Jonathan, that we have to have one more debate about the OBA. And then personally, I think if nothing exceptional happens, that's it for a while.
Yeah, I reckon that there won't be much until after the budget debate. But then I think things will be opening up again.
Probably. I
Yeah.
think we'll give it a rest. I mean, there must be tens of thousands of words written on the OBA, and I've got a few thoughts after the week that we've seen with Ben Smith interviews and stuff like that. Um, but I think because of the OBA last week, we couldn't talk about the debate that's going on in the House of Lords at the moment about the overseas territories, and I think it's important to look at that. And I think TNN had a brief story, didn't they, on homelessness and two guys who were facing a lot of problems because of the appalling weather in Bermuda last week, and I'd be remiss of us, if we didn't touch on that as well. I think, don't you?
Yeah, no, I agree. Those are all very good points. So, yeah.
Especially with the housing minister Zane De Silva coming out about he was on the government's own podcast, and I refuse to mention his name, even if I could remember, talking about the housing policy. The two kind of go together. So the OBA, I mean, there's been plenty of quotes, plenty of stuff put out there. There's a few things that have struck a chord with me, mainly because of their irony. You know, that's been going on. It's possibly an understatement. I mean, you've got your thoughts, I know, but I saw this quote from Ben Smith. He said, "What I'm actually looking for is the confidence from the country. In order to do that, it's about doing what we are doing today, having the conversation about what we're trying to do in doing politics in a different way and trying to be more collaborative and trying to understand that we can have differences." I mean, that screamed irony. You know,
Yeah,
you've
you
got
mean
the
in the
interim
sense that
leader
there
of a
were
party.
differences within the OBA and they couldn't get past it?
Well, they're calling for a collaborative governance, and yet they can't be collaborative internally.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to what I was saying the other day. Like, how can they be expected to lead the government if they, the country, if they can't even lead themselves? And if they're calling for collaboration in terms of national politics, but they can't have collaboration within their party. I think that's what you're getting at, and I think it's a very
Yeah,
good point.
yeah. I mean, it's incredible irony. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a quote I saw: "If you couldn't manage unity within your caucus, and it's not quite caucus, it's in the MPs, I think. How will you manage unity in the country?" Well, it's a really good question.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I raised a point in one of the previous podcasts. How can they be trusted with democracy if they cannot follow their own democracy?
Well, he can't. You absolutely can't. And I think this comes back to a point we've made before, I think, as well, about unity within the OBA. I think Ben Smith is the eighth leader in 9 years or the ninth leader in 8 years. I forget which way around it is.
It's still bad either way.
Well, there's not a lot of unity, is there?
No, no, and in fairness, being in opposition does destabilize a party. I mean, we saw when the PLP was in opposition for decades. I remember particularly. I mean, I was a child, but I remember in the '80s there was, the split that led to the NLP forming,
Yeah,
and the premier at the time, John Swan, he called a snap election
yeah,
to take advantage of the schism within the opposition,
which he would
and
do.
before that, the PLP was like this close to coming to the government, but because of that snap election, when the opposition was split, it set the opposition movement back at least a decade. I mean, that was in the late '80s, around '86, '88, and the PLP didn't get in until 1998.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're seeing that with the OBA at the moment. They just keep fracturing.
A key fracturing. Mind you, the OBA is a significantly younger party than the PLP, isn't it? So your timeline that you express there might be longer for them.
Well, I mean, I know the OBA doesn't like it when people say this, but honestly, I don't see any difference between the OBA and the UBP in terms of their ideology and their membership.
Mm.
To me, they're the exact same party, just with a rebrand.
Well, they became the exact same party, I think, when they merged with when the BDA and the UBP merged, which is a bit of a shame, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the BDA, although it was like a split from the UBP, I do think that they had the potential to be a new politics, but
Yeah.
being reabsorbed back into what really was the UBP, it just ended up being a branding exercise,
Well, here's a
but
really
with
good
less
thing.
professionality because the UBP had they knew how to govern.
It's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah. Well,
Right? They
you
seem
know,
to have lost all of their structure and internal human capital of how to run a
they
organized
do.
party,
All the heavyweights from the UBP days have gone.
or at least they went into the back.
No, mostly gone.
Yeah, I mean,
If you
I'm
think
not a
about it.
member, so I have no idea.
Well, I think
I'm just
about
saying
who's in
from the
the.
outside, I don't really see much difference in the parties.
I mean, you talked about branding there, and it does raise the issue, doesn't it? Can you rebrand after a coup?
Well, I mean, in any coup, we like if you look at any of the coups in any other country, the coup leaders are quick to point out that they did it for democracy and to protect democracy, and we're just gonna have a moment until we get back to normal programming. That's just kind of standard stuff you say after a coup.
Yeah, I guess. I saw there was a piece in there was an opinion column today by Tarika Dillis. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, the founder and director of operations for Unity in the Community. And I want to read some of it because I think it sums up a lot of the feeling. What the public witnessed, and this is with the coup, was not a confident organization mapping a clear future, but a defensive maneuver designed to stabilize internal discomfort. It reinforced the long standing perception that real power in the OBA does not reside with its membership, but rather with a small inner circle, demonstrating that renewal is permitted only under tightly managed terms. This criticism is not new, it's an old one. This is precisely the problem. She goes on to say leadership turnover, internal drama, and abrupt resets have become defining patterns for the OBA. Each event is framed as unfortunate but necessary. She goes on, after each, calls for unity and patience arise, yet the party emerges weaker in the eyes of voters who are weary of waiting for coherence that never materialize. Is the result is a paradox, a party that claims it is ready to govern, yet repeatedly shows an inability to manage itself transparently. And those three paragraphs I read out seem to sum up the situation rather well to me. I don't know
Yeah,
what you think.
no, I agree. I mean, it kind of echoes what we were just saying. If
It
they
does
they
really, but
can't if they can't govern themselves, how can they govern the country?
I think it just puts it into better context personally.
Yeah, more
You,
poetic.
you mentioned trust, and it was interesting this week. I had a message from somebody. I can't really say who, you know,
Yeah.
um, but it hit the nail on the head. If you ask me, when you're talking about trust, they said if trust is gained in teaspoons, it is lost in buckets.
More than buckets in this case.
Hmm?
More than buckets in this case, more like
Well,
a fire hose.
I actually put that I posted that on on a story, and somebody came back, not buckets, barrels.
I mean,
But but
I've
it
seen.
comes back. This is one of the
Mhm.
things that struck me this week is they've lost so much trust. Can they actually get it back in time for an election?
Well, I mean, I've watched and listened to a couple of interviews that the new opposition leader, the new leader of the OBA,
He's
Ben
the
Smith.
interim opposition. Sorry, he's the opposition leader. He's
Yeah.
the interim party leader.
Okay. I've heard some interviews that Mr. Smith has given of late, and
Well, it's
the key
confusing,
thing
isn't it?
that
I'm just saying it's
strike,
confusing.
yeah, but the key thing that struck me from listening to him is that he's on the defensive. They they
Totally.
they've done this coup. They've been on their back foot since the beginning. The narrative has already defined them, and the narrative is already there. It's a
Yeah.
coup. You can't trust them. Mr. King got he got scunnered. He was not treated with respect or very well. That's just the narrative that is out there, and Mr. Smith is doing his darndest to try to rebut that. But I mean, listening to his interview recently, I think it was on the Bermuda Broadcasting, BBC. he just really sounded so defensive. And I just thought of that Shakespeare quote, "The lady doth protest too much," in a
Mm.
sense, you know? And he has to. This is going to haunt him his entire leadership.
I think it is. You know, you jokingly in the last podcast we did talked about having a snap election. At least I think you were being joking. But I've been kind of ruminating on it, and the temptation for David Burt to do that must be enormous. And I come back to what I said, that he's the interim party leader. Has there ever been a general election that's involved an interim party leader? I mean, from the off, they're right on the back foot, aren't they?
Yeah. The closest comparison, and I don't think it was an interim leader per se, but the closest comparison I think would have been the late 80s split of the PLP NLP, which
Right.
I referenced just a little while
Yeah,
ago,
yeah, yeah.
which led to a snap election called by John Swan. That's the closest, but I mean, the PLP leader at that time, I'm pretty sure was Lois Brown Evans still. The NLP, I cannot remember who their first
It
leader was.
was it Charles Jeffers Senior?
I think he came later, but I
Did he?
could be
Okay.
mistaken. I'll need to go back and look at my history books.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I looked at the 1980s.
Well, I interviewed him actually as leader of the NLP in the 90s. That's
Right.
why I thought he was him. But
Yeah,
maybe
it
he
could
wasn't.
be. I'm not sure, but
Anyway,
that's the closest comparison I could think of.
but to call an election that's then fought by an interim leader is not a good look. Well, as we said before, I can't understand why they didn't get the process over and done with. Call a special meeting. He'd have been elected by acclamation. It would have been done and over with. Now they're waiting until September to actually elect him properly, and obviously that gives time for somebody else to come along as well if needs be. It's a very odd strategy, very odd. But everything about this is a bit odd.
I mean, I don't think we're going to see new Senate appointments or a shadow cabinet shuffle until after the budget. I think they're just trying to steady the ship for right now, get through the
Probably,
budget, and then
yeah.
after that, probably in March, there'll be new Senate appointments and a bit of a shuffle. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Mr. King in the interim as well.
Well,
Um,
I suppose he's what is he? No, he's a backbencher now, isn't he?
Backbencher at the moment, yeah, but still, technically, as far as I know, he's still part of the OBA caucus. I think the rip is still on him.
Yeah, as far as I know. As far as I
Yeah,
know, it is. Yeah, I can see the PLP having a field day. Will the real leader of the OBA please get up
yeah.
when they
I
talk
mean, it
about
was
housing?
interesting going back to one of the interviews that I referred to earlier. When I think it was when he was talking to Bermuda Broadcasting with the journalist Gary Foster Skelton. The question was raised to him: what was it that Mr. King did? And it seemed, just going from what I understood from Mr. Smith saying, it seemed to be that the other OBA MPs were upset about the way Mr. King did his campaign to become leader. He, and in particular, he did an interview with BBC, which was cited in that interview, where he was critical of the way the leadership of the OBA had operated so far. And he basically was saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and not having any success. So we need to do a bit of a change of course. This is what I propose to do.
Hmm.
And it seems, just going from what I understand from Mr. Smith saying, he was like, oh, he was critical of the party. And, he was therefore critical of the MPs and by definition, me, who was the deputy leader. And in particular, in his criticism of the 2025 election, it was good for the OBA in that they almost doubled their seats. But Mr. King was saying we should have done more. We should have been better. I believe Mr. Smith was like the campaign manager of that
No, he
election. I'm
wasn't the
not sure of
campaign
his
manager.
official
Barry
title.
Brewer. Barry
Was,
Brewer was the campaign manager. I don't know official title that Ben had.
but he was still the deputy leader. And I kind of
Yeah.
feel, I got the impression from Mr. Smith that he took those comments by Mr. King personally.
It felt a bit like that, didn't it? Yeah. I think Ben had a very central role, as you'd expect, as a deputy
Yeah.
leader.
And so
But
any
I mean,
criticism of the campaign and how the leadership was up to that point, Mr. Smith took it personally, and that seems to have planted the seed of this kind of schism between them.
which comes down to a little bit about egos, doesn't it? And being able to not being able to take criticism. If I remember rightly, the timing of that campaign was when I can't remember exactly if Robert King had announced he was running for leader or was about to announce, but he was clearly in the run up to the leadership election for the OBA and
Hmm.
was part of his electioneering. And he called it as it was. And if you can't stand that,
I
well,
mean, he just had a better campaign to become leader, and it showed he won, right? Even if by
exactly.
17 votes, it's still a win, you
Exactly.
know?
And don't forget, Jonathan, remember those documents we saw that suggested the OBA should have won 4 or 5 more seats?
Which is what
If
I
they,
understood Mr. King to be referring to.
me too. And if there'd been better campaigning, they could have had 15 or 16 seats. So it wasn't just him saying it. I did remember that. You pointed that out to me this week, I remember, and it did smack of sour grapes a bit. We'll see. I guess now the OBA will try and circle the wagons as best as they possibly can and
The
try
other
and
thing
limit
that
the
I didn't quite
fallout from now
understand
on
from
in.
what Mr. Smith was saying was like, we need to be more collaborative. Okay, I get that you don't want to be opposing things for the sake of opposing them. Be in opposition, but you also have to demonstrate that you are different. What's the point of
Exactly.
being PLP light? If you know,
You've taken the words out of my mouth, and I'm glad you came back to that because I remember reading, well, what's the point of being in opposition? Why don't you join the PLP? Yes, you're going to collaborate. But generally speaking, the collaboration goes to things like national security, doesn't it? And things like
yeah.
that.
But I
You're
mean,
not
Mr. Smith was basically saying, "Oh, well, we actually agree with the PLP on everything." Okay, well, then what? Why do you exist?
why
What's
do
the
you
difference?
exist? I know, and I've heard that in the House a lot, where the OBA will not necessarily vote with the PLP. They certainly won't vote against, and they said they agree with the policy. And then I've heard them say criticize the policy afterwards, even though they didn't vote against it. There has
Which
been
makes them
some.
look like hypocrites, to be honest.
It
If
makes them
you
look very
opposed it, then you
uncoordinated.
should have given your constructive criticism, showed what you as a government in waiting would have done, not support it, and then once you're out of parliament, badmouth it. That just seems kind of
I agree.
juvenile to me.
I totally agree. Now, there are obviously times when both parties in opposition and in government will collaborate,
Yeah, of
but
course. I
as
mean,
you
there's going to
say,
be unity in things.
generally the opposition needs to show they're a government in waiting, and by collaborating a lot with government, they won't show that. And as you quite rightly use the term, it could well be they're seen as PLP light.
Yeah. And again, I agree they shouldn't be opposing things just for the sake of opposing, but they
Agreed.
should have a clear policy position, ideology that informs what they would do instead. You
I
know,
agree, and that, as far as I'm aware, was not enunciated in that interview.
but that's what I understand. Mr. King, when he was campaigning, whether you agreed with him or not, he was trying to say we need to have a clear distinction between what we believe, what we do, and what the PLP is and does.
And
So
he
he
was,
was, in my opinion, trying to say we need to have a more defined what is the OBA, what would we do in power.
and
Whether he's right or wrong, that's just what I understand. He was trying to
no, I
position.
think you're right. I think you're right, and I think possibly he took it to the extreme in some sense because he was quite aggressive about it. And maybe that was a learning curve for him. I don't know. It probably wasn't the best policy. I mean, there was an instance where I think where the House almost came to blows.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, and I think most people know this, but just to be clear, meant to get ahead in politics, at least in the political system we have, you do need to be a bit of you do need a bit of an ego. You do need
Yeah,
some arrogance. I'm pretty sure most of MPs, some are my friends, have a degree of narcissism to them. That's just what you need to be kind of cutthroat to get through there. That's
I
one
agree.
reason I'm not a politician.
Me neither. Not
I
nearly
don't have that
ambitious enough.
killer instinct.
No,
I can do the political analysis, but all the stuff you have to do to actually be a successful politician here,
no, thanks.
I don't. That's not for
No,
me.
thanks. No, no, I
But I
totally
just say
agree.
that so that any MP, any politician does tend to have a bit of an ego. And so I can see why egos would get bruised and there would be an ego aspect to this. You know,
Let's leave it at that, shall we? I
we're
think
not
we've
going to have
talked
any
enough.
MPs ever come on here again, are they?
Well, we've had a few. Maybe we can ask them how's your ego
Yeah.
when they come on again, because I'm sure they will. Although getting ministers on is harder work than I
Yeah,
thought it would
but
be.
I agree. I think we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with the budget, which I believe is next Friday, and that's going to
It's
be the
the
first sitting of the
20th.
House since
Yeah.
this coup. So that'll be some interesting fireworks, and I'm pretty sure post budget, this whole mess of the OBA is going to erupt again, and I'm sure we will have more episodes concerning it.
Oh, I'm sure the shadow cabinet and the senators will probably kick it up all over again. Mentioned at the very beginning of this that the OBA debate did stop us focusing on this debate or committee
Hmm.
that's been held in the House of Lords. I think it's ongoing still. It was last week, and I believe it's this week as well. Um, just to very quickly recap on the story for those who may have missed it, you've got there was Lord MacDonald of Salford. And I come onto his CV because it's rather impressive. Um, he told this parliamentary committee, and he suggested that it might be time to explore independence for some of the UK's overseas territories. Interestingly, he called them scraps of empire, which
Yeah,
I don't know how well that went down. Um, he
I mean,
said
it
that
is true.
it is true, a little bit condescending.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I will say, whenever I'm in the UK, most of the UK people I talk to don't even know there are colonies still of the empire.
No, most of
They're
them
like,
don't know
"Oh,
where
you're from
Bermuda is.
Bermuda," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm British, like you. It's
Yeah,
empire."
yeah, no, no.
They're like,
Well,
"We don't
most
have
of
an
them don't know
empire
where
anymore." I was
Bermuda
like, "Yes,
is.
you do."
But anyway, he went on to say that some of the territories, such as obviously like Bermuda, are financially independent, but he raised the spectre, saying that how they regulate financial services, he reckoned, could put the UK's international reputation at risk, especially in places like Virgin Islands, Cayman, and Bermuda. And he suggested the UK should reevaluate its relationships with the overseas territories and update or replace the 2012 White Paper, which governs those relationships. He also noted that some governors, he didn't name them obviously, had privately raised the topic of independence. Now, it's kind of important to put this into context a little bit because of who he is. So, Lord MacDonald of Salford, he was the British ambassador to Israel. He was a former foreign policy advisor to the former Prime Minister Tony Blair. He was the British ambassador to Germany, and he was the permanent undersecretary at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office from 2015 to 2020. That made him the most senior civil servant in the Foreign Office. And he actually, in this time, helped to oversee Brexit, the increasing tensions with Russia, the shift in US UK relations, and the expansion of sanction regimes.
Hmm.
Right? So he's a heavy hitter. He kind of knows what he's talking about. And again, just so the listeners and viewers get this, the committee was the Constitution Committee of the House of Lords. That is a cross party scrutiny committee, and it looks at whether government legislation and public policy complies with the UK's constitutional principles. And amongst other things it looks at is the status of overseas territories. Now, it's sitting at the moment to review progress against the commitments set out in the 2023 UK Overseas Territories Joint Declaration. I just
Hmm.
got it from the House of Lords website. And that declaration, it looked at improving transparency, it looked at shared values, looks at support for the overseas territories. So that kind of puts it into a little bit of context. So my reading of what he said, that he is actually openly suggesting that independence for some OTs does deserve discussion, and that it's driven in part by his concerns over financial regulation and Britain's reputation. And so to me, he's kind of raising this issue that if the UK maintains responsibility for the OTs, and especially those ones operate like Bermuda, which are very big financial centres, the UK could be exposed to a quote reputational or diplomatic consequences if problems arise. I should say, not arrive. Part of it to me is like we better get rid of them in case they cause a problem. independence by the back door. What do you think?
I have a lot of strong feelings on aspects that Mr. Salford has said.
Lord
Um,
Salford, please.
what is his actual last name?
I don't know, I just called Lord Salford. I don't know his last name.
Um, I have a lot of strong feelings about aspects that he said, and I hope I don't go on a rant. So bear
Go on a
with me.
rant. Your rants are always good fun. I've had the odd rant. Go on.
Let me try to keep my thoughts as succinct as I can. I think it is highly ironic that the UK is worried about their reputational damage off Bermuda and Cayman while they have aided and abetted a genocide in Palestine. How dare they come to us and say that we are affecting their reputation? They have facilitated a genocide and they want to talk about, oh, financial problems. Come on.
No,
Sorry, I'm toning
no,
it
go
back.
for it. I think pointing out these ironies is absolutely right. I mean, there's been this massive debate about Jim Radcliffe and colonization by immigrants, and go on, it's the same thing, but go on, have a rant.
And another thing, and I'm tapping into my Scottish ancestry here. I've been clear that I support an independent Scotland. I support an independent Bermuda. You have the UK government consistently denying the Scottish people a right to self determination. Yeah, we had the independence vote in 2014. Since then, they have continued to deny the people of Scotland the right to self determination. And yet they have the nerve to say, oh, we don't mind if Bermuda or these other colonies go independent. Colonies have the right to self determination. What's the difference between Bermuda and Scotland? If Bermuda has the right to self determination, so does Scotland, so does Wales, so does Ireland. Well, Northern
Well,
Ireland in this case.
one of the things here that there's an implied kind of logic here, isn't it? That a territory's an overseas territory's financial sector could create potential geopolitical or sanctions exposure for the UK. You're not really going to get that with Scotland, are you?
You know, I'm seeing a lot of what Mr. I
Salford.
don't recognize him as a lord, sorry. This fellow. Um, I see a lot of this thing is spoken in context of what's happening with the US at the moment. And it ties into what we said earlier, what happened earlier in January, with the whole Greenland thing. And also, we had that Fox commentator talking about we could take Bermuda, you know? And I said at the time, Britain's not going to defend us. They won't go out into a war over Bermuda with the US.
No.
Going to war with Argentina was one thing over Las Malvinas, Falklands, but Bermuda versus and the United States, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Britain won't fight for that. They will hope to avoid it. And to me, this is kind of what they're saying. Let's get rid of these colonies because the new U.S. national security is reinvigorating their imperialist Monroe doctrine with their Donroe corollary. So let's dump them so that we don't have to have any concern about any potential friction. That's kind of how I'm reading it in that context. Yeah, they're talking about the tax haven aspect. London is our biggest rival,
It's
the
huge
city of
tax
London,
haven,
and
yeah.
they're probably more reputational risk for the UK than Bermuda.
I
I
agree. And
can't
it's
speak for
absolutely,
Cayman and the other islands. I'm not familiar with their regulatory
and
system.
the square mile is full of dirty Russian money.
Exactly. You know, so I
I know
that's why I'm saying I have a lot of strong feelings.
no,
I'm
well, that's,
restraining myself for the
I wish you
podcast.
wouldn't. It'd be good fun.
Well,
But that's,
I've got a dog here walking around, and if I start ranting, it's probably going to bark. It'll be
but it,
literal dog whistles and barking.
but it's really interesting, the reasonings, isn't it? And with everything going on, again, the implications, he hadn't said it, is
Yeah,
that
and you
Britain could
mentioned
be
independence by the
exposed.
back door. Can you force independence on a people? Is that not a form of colonialism in and of itself to just cut people loose?
Well, isn't there's a specific rule, isn't there? I don't know if it's a law or a policy that there has to be something like 60%, is it, or 70% turnout? And of that 70%, there's got to be something like a 60% vote in favour of independence. I forget the exact numbers, but the bar is pretty high. Now, would you change those rules and just say to Bermuda, sorry, you're off?
I mean, that's kind of what this guy seems to be saying.
There's the implication is there to me, definitely.
But
Yeah,
it's
we're a bit
also a
worried
veiled
about you.
threat because he could also be saying either the UK colonies go off on their own or we bring them to heel and they
Well,
do what
he's no
we
longer.
tell them. And then if that's the case, then that kind of undermines our entire business model of our international business. What do we do then? Is Britain going to pay reparations and subsidize us for the rest of time?
No, of course not.
I mean, I
No, of
do think
course
they
not.
should pay reparations, but I can't see that the UK is going to entertain that idea either.
It was I was really intrigued about what was stated in that article, what he
Mm-hmm.
said. My initial reaction was, oh, they want to get rid of us. The Brits want to
Yeah,
just cut the ties. And then if you look at it closer, it doesn't actually say that, but there is an implication that they're worried about reputational damage to the UK, which there
right.
hasn't been. I mean, the only reputational damage was the TCI, Turks and Caicos. That was pretty damaging, but that was corruption, wasn't it?
I think there was just a ruling on that, but I haven't read over the court case. And by the way, his name is MacDonald, Mr. MacDonald, Lord Suffolk. I will call him Mr. MacDonald. So,
Call him Sir, Jonathan.
I'll think about that one.
I just had to put that in just to wind you up a little bit. But I was intrigued. Now,
But it
this
also tied into another article, which was I don't know if it was directly related, but there was the Attorney General,
same
Kim
committee.
Wilkinson, I think earlier this week, talking
Yeah.
about similar issues. I
Well,
think
she
she
was,
was saying that we should have the right to have some say in who becomes the governor.
yes, yes. And I don't really see what's wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in support of a republic system, but my vision of a republic is like a constitutional republic, kind of like a constitutional monarchy, but we elect the head of state. So my idea would be our president would be like the governor, but just kind of ceremonial. So in that sense, I think it gels with my own thinking, just at
But she
least in
wasn't
training wheels
suggesting
before we become independent in a republic.
she wasn't suggesting getting rid of the governor at all, just having
No,
a
I
say in
am.
who the governor was. Oh, I know you are. You would. You'd have the revolution tomorrow if you had your way. But as but I suddenly thought, well, actually, I'm really surprised Bermuda doesn't have a say.
Yeah,
I mean,
I always assumed that they at least consulted us, and we would say, "No, not this guy. He's like a skinhead or something." We don't.
well,
I'm not saying that ever happened.
well, no, but actually, you say that, but I actually posted a rather facetious comment on the story, and it was in response to somebody saying, "Well, why should we? Why should Bermuda have a say?" And I said, "Yeah, but if you get Nigel Farage as prime minister, and he appoints one of his lunatic, nutty, right wing mates as the governor of Bermuda,
I mean,
no,
Farage has been to Bermuda a few times, so
he has. You think no, actually, we should have a say in that." The fact that we don't, and you're open, I mean, that's a far fetched example, although frankly,
is it?
I don't know how far fetched it is. It's a bit worrying, to be honest, because you can see Mr. Farage saying to a nice donor, "Oh, I'll make you governor of Bermuda for 4 years. Have a little holiday. You'll be fine." It's not that far fetched, but you would want to say in that. You know,
I mean, we can
diplomatic
have a say in terms
relations.
of protest, and that might turbocharge the independence movement. So maybe I should embrace that. I don't know.
Maybe you embracing reform, Jonathan. Yeah, I hear hell's about to freeze over.
I am not endorsing reform, but I do see the political opportunities that might
So you're an
um,
opportunist
create.
now.
Touche, sir. Touche.
That's the best laugh I've had all week. Thank you. The last best laugh is when you suggested Michael Fay across the floor to the PLP. That was about a week ago. I'm still got a bellyache from that one. This will keep me going another week. I'm not going to let you forget this one. Starling supports Farage. There we
My
go.
word. I will not be allowed to go back to Scotland after that.
You won't be allowed to leave Bermuda, man. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. Both, I'm not entirely sure what happens to his committee's findings. It is a look at it. So presumably they produce a paper and maybe some recommendations at the end of it. It's not binding. Be fascinating to see what those recommendations are. And I think between us, Jonathan, we should probably keep an eye out so we can come back and on this podcast and see if there are any implications for Bermuda. Um, you picked the homelessness topic, Jonathan, didn't you? Is that a particular reason?
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have left to really get into it, but
A little bit.
it's a
We'll start the
perennial
debate.
issue. But so of course you're in the UK at the moment, Jeremy.
Yeah,
But we've had some really big cold fronts and winter storms.
I've seen the
Yeah,
reports. Yeah,
but basically the last 2 weekends have been like an Arctic hurricane.
yeah. You've had the hail and everything. Yeah,
Yeah, and of course for me, my power being out, it's cold in the house, but at least I have a house, and I know there's a lot of homeless people out there. And I believe TNN, the kind of social media news site,
mm,
they highlighted this as well. They talked to I want to say two homeless people,
they
just
did. Yeah,
raising these issues because as cold as it might be inside a house, it's colder outside.
yeah.
When you just
And
got
you're open to
hail
the
coming right
elements.
down on you and being
Yeah.
soaked. I mean, I remember when I was in the regiment during boot camp, we did and boot camp is for listeners who are not familiar post conscription. Boot camp was always in January. And I remember we were camping up at Morgan's Point at one point, and it was a really cold night. I had hypothermia almost, not serious hypothermia, but I had the touching off it. And I mean, I've lived in the Russian Far East, and it felt colder that night in boot camp at Morgan's Point than being in the Russian Far East at that time. So I'm just saying Bermuda is not as cold, but with the dampness, it can be a deceptive and bone chilling cold if
Absolutely.
you're
It's
out
because
in
of
the
humidity.
elements.
Yeah.
And we have, I want to say there's about 1,000 people are technically homeless, not necessarily living on the street, but they're like couch surfing or sleeping in a car type thing. So there
1,100 was the
are,
last survey.
yeah, it's a large percentage of. Well, I mean, it's probably I haven't done the maths, but there's a lot of people that are homeless.
I think we should call them unhoused. I think that's a better description, actually, than homeless.
What was the description?
Unhoused.
Unhoused. Yes, yes, I think that's good.
But no,
And
you're
of
right.
course, we are working on increasing the housing stock. Minister Zane De Silva, who is the Minister of Housing, he announced recently the work that they're doing. It is all a drop in the bucket, to be honest. And the only way to really do it is if you really commit with the political will and funnel a huge amount of money into building like apartment blocks type thing, like council flats. At the moment, I don't think there's the political will for that because that's going to need a lot of money. That's probably going to need greater progressive taxation. Although the CIT might change those dynamics, we'll
Well,
find
we
out in the
are.
budget
Exactly.
next week. Um, yeah, it's
I
difficult.
think it's a travesty that, I mean, I did a year long campaign on homelessness when I was still at the RG as chief reporter and got to know the people at home, the charity looking after the homeless very well. And I talked to an awful lot of homeless people who did not want to be homeless,
Hmm.
who had various reasons for being homeless. They wanted to work, they wanted a home, they wanted stability, and yet the system was set up against them. You don't have a home, you don't have an address, you can't get a bank account, that kind of thing. You're homeless, you're more difficult to get a job. You're living in, you might not be homeless or unhoused, as I said, you may be on somebody's couch and putting an awful lot of pressure on the people you're staying with. You may be
Having
living in places that are virtually uninhabitable, and
having experienced brief episodes of homelessness myself, it really does a number on your mind, on your mental health as
yes,
well. Not to
it
mention your
does.
physical health, being exposed to all of this
Mental health,
instability. Yeah.
absolutely. And um, I think the fact that there are now 1,100 people who don't have a proper roof over their head, who are unhoused, and that's a hugely significant increase on the official figures that existed
Hmm.
before Home came along and actually counted them. Should be a national embarrassment.
I mean, we're one of the richest countries in the world if you look at it as a per capita GDP, but of course that doesn't factor in the inequality. We may be rich on paper, but we do have massive economic inequalities in our country.
We should come on to that because there's been a bunch of economic figures coming out and tourism figures come out this week. Maybe we
Hmm.
have a look at that next week. I did a bit of a deep dive into them today because I had a bit of time on my hands. Yeah, I know it's the kind of thing I do. It's really sad, isn't it? It's because I'm living alone in Hull. That's what it does to me, Jonathan. I take a deep dive into the economy. Wow, I'm sad. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. There is money there if you have the will to do it, is what I'm saying in a roundabout way. And it's rather like when we talked about road safety, there just isn't the will to do something about it. You know, Zane, we're recording this on Friday, just a few hours actually, coincidentally, before Hull City beat Chelsea in the fourth round of the FA Cup. But
Hope
I
springs
digress.
eternal.
Come on, man. But Zane De Silva announced today a kind of a 10-year initiative to build 1,500 homes, and he talks about them being affordable. And it's a real bugbear of mine because what's the definition of affordability? But in that, surely there's room for some social housing in that. There's no mention of it
Well,
at all.
that's part of the political will thing. It's not even in
Exactly.
people's thinking that we could do social housing. I mean, there are problems of UK social housing. You know, the council flats has not always
Yes.
been perfect,
No.
but it's provided housing. You know,
Exactly.
I
But the important thing, Jonathan, it gives you an address. And with an address, you could do so much more, like get a bank account, like get a job. You know,
and this comes down
stop.
to, and I'm gonna get in my socialist rant about people over profit type thing. We should build an apartment building in town somewhere. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be very basic kind of studio apartments. It helps. It will get people sorted. You know. Now, someone might say that, oh, that piece of land we can make more profit building a luxury apartments or office spaces, but not everything is about profit. Can we really afford to have people homeless in our country? I think we should commit that capital to build these
I totally
basic
agree.
council flats in the city. Yeah,
And
it's going to cost money. It's probably owned by private landlords, but there can be cases for, uh, I should know the word of this, mandatory. I sat on the Commission of Inquiry. I should know the name for this, where you compensate people and you take their
yes,
property.
yeah, you could subsidize a rent or something like that.
Yeah, and there are derelict office buildings in the city. Um,
Derelict buildings, lots of
it may
government
cost
derelict
more
buildings.
to renovate them to make them into housing, but knock them down and build a new council flat house. I don't know.
Well, the other thing is, there was a long time ago, 10 or 12 years ago, I think there was a report that came out that there was office space for 4,000 people, empty office space for 4,000 people. I have no idea if
But
that's still the case, but there will be a significant amount of empty office space, and some of it not particularly great office space. That's why it's empty. You know, why not? Why not help? You know, a not for profit, set up a not for profit, put 20 mil of the CIT funds in it, get
I
it
mean, we're
going.
also seeing some consequences of the kind of decade of austerity that we had post 2008. And this falls on both the PLP government and the OBA governments.
Yeah,
Um, we've had austerity. We don't like to use that word. Sometimes we use a different word just for political spin purposes. But we've had austerity pretty much since 2008.
yep,
Um, and part of that has meant that the regular maintenance to maintain certain public buildings has not happened.
yep,
And this is also an infrastructure. You could talk about the asphalt
potholes.
plant or a
Yeah,
Tynes Bay type thing,
yeah,
but also when
absolutely.
it
Yeah.
comes to the housing stock or buildings which are owned by the state but haven't been able to be maintained because of austerity, you've kind of cut down on the maintenance. That and austerity to me has always been a bit of a fool's gold. It
Always a fool's
it
gold.
it looks like you're saving money, but in the long term, it's costing us all more. And just recently, we saw that building. I think it was in the news yesterday. It's owned by the Bermuda Hospital Board. It
Yeah,
was an old
mhm.
guest house in Pembroke.
With a fantastic history.
Fantastic history. It was very important back in the days of segregation. A
And
lot of
they
the
have the
black. It was a
stars. They have,
black-owned guest house,
and they have the
and
stars staying there.
yeah, because a lot of African American stars which came to Bermuda couldn't be housed in
Yeah,
white hotels, so they ended
yeah,
up in
yeah. I
black
know.
owned
I
hotels.
agree, but it's been allowed to deteriorate until the point where they have to knock it down.
And if you read it, it says that it was kind of mothballed in 2014 because the cost of maintaining it was prohibitive. 2014, that was in the midst of our main austerity period. So I can completely see how, okay, we can't afford to maintain this right now, mothball it. Bermuda's environment is not forgiving. It does a lot of damage to properties unless you're maintaining it constantly. And
It's
so, of course, it's no surprise that this guest house has kind of fallen to the wayside, and now we have to knock it down. We're
it's
losing a lot of our cultural history because we of austerity, in a sense.
it's kind of interesting you raised that example, and I can't remember the name
Lovely.
and of the guest house.
The guest house.
It's interesting you raise that. Now, I can't go into very much detail because simply I'm really not authorized to do it. Suffice to say that there was a plan for that building and it did
Okay.
involve homelessness.
I
Um,
was unaware.
yeah, and I'm really not at liberty to say more,
We'll do a
unfortunately.
patty request. I'll do a
Maybe,
patty request.
maybe. But I can't say any more, unfortunately, but I do know that. And it's very, very, very depressing
Well,
to
I
see
mean,
what has
I
happened.
can't speak to the exact example you're saying because I don't know the information, but it's a common refrain in Bermudian politics that reports just sit on shelves gathering dust, right?
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, but I think I'm not sure it was a report that just gathered dust, other than red tape, bureaucracy, lack of willpower. I don't know. Something going the way. Well, I know what happened, but I just can't say it.
Right. But again, this comes back to the CIT. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but the corporate income tax. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but it will be interesting to see what funds are raised from that and how that applies to the kind of the cascading waterfall buckets of use. I know the
Well, that's the
priority
potential.
is to pay down the debt, but there is an argument to deal with some of the issues that we're experiencing.
I totally agree, and I can't remember the actual buckets of that waterfall effect, but I'm pretty sure one of them, at least, was social a
Yeah,
responsibility,
yeah.
and housing would fall under that. Housing for the unhoused, as well as providing whatever affordable housing means. What's affordable? Oh, it does annoy me. I remember going to a Chamber of Commerce presentation where Mariko Thomas banged his head on the wall when he talked about, don't talk to me about affordable housing. And it really struck a nerve. It sounds great, but what's affordable to one is totally unaffordable to the other.
I mean, I think the technical terminology is that it's supposed to be no more. Your rent should be no more than a third off your monthly salary, type thing, or if your
I think you're
salary as
right.
a
Yeah.
whole.
But this is to
Anything
buy as
above that
well.
is not affordable housing. But of
Yeah.
course, as I mentioned earlier, there's a massive economic inequality in Bermuda.
Yep.
Um, and we do now have the minimum wage, so I guess the affordable housing definition should be whatever a third of
Well,
the minimum
you, you,
wage would be.
you say that, Jonathan, but I'm 90% sure here that when I was news editor of the Gazette, I kept making sure that Jason Hayward was asked over and over again how many people benefited from the minimum wage, and it turned out to be a few hundred.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
And well,
not a game
there's
changer.
carve outs for especially the hospitality industry,
Yeah, because they
which
include
I don't
tips
think
and
should have
stuff like that.
happened.
No, I
But
don't. Should have
yeah,
been minimum wage tips on top. But there aren't that many who are affected. So what I'm trying to say is you build low cost housing, affordable housing. So you still don't know what affordability is. You can't measure it in terms of the minimum wage.
yeah. Well, the minimum wage was supposed to be just the basement wage. I know they're still working on the living wage. We had Senator Misha Fubler on
Yeah,
some time ago, who's the chair of the Wage Commission, or at least he was at the time. I just say that because the government commissions and boards get reappointed every year, so I don't know what if he's reappointed as the chair.
no.
I know he does listen to the podcast, so I'll probably get a message in a day or two. Um,
Anyway, we'll see. I mean, I suppose it's to be welcome that there is action being taken on, let's call it low cost housing. That
yeah,
has to be
it's
welcome.
baby steps, but at least it is steps.
1,500 over 10 years is not going to be enough.
No.
Given the housing crisis we've got now and the rent as a result. and the basic cause is there's less people living per house than there
Well,
used
we're
to be.
doing the census, I think, this spring, so it'll be interesting to see the new data we get.
Yeah, man, we're doing it this spring. We probably won't get it till 2028, the results. We had third quarter economic performance this week, third quarter 2025, this week in February.
Yeah, that's been kind of the case for years now. We kind of get like, I remember in previous years when the whole inflation was going up after the pandemic, people were like, why are we only getting inflation data from 5 months ago? And I was like, well, I agree. I don't know why it's taken so long, but it's nothing new.
I think, from my understanding, there's just a shortage of staff in that department,
Yeah, which
which is austerity.
could go to austerity again. It's all full circle.
Talking about full circles, mate, I'm going to watch for the kickoff in the centre circle. If I didn't mention it, we're recording this on Friday, and I'm getting very excited at Hull versus Chelsea. Hull welcoming back its former player and manager, Liam Rosenior, who's going to get the most outstanding welcome, and he's going to leave a very disappointed man there when we win 2-1.
I like your way to manifest with the universe.
I am manifesting. I am manifesting. And when we win, I'll be straight on the blower to the Swizzle Inn, which is a big Chelsea pub, to gloat. And if we lose, I'm not going back to Bermuda.
And in the in the meantime, we will be back next week with the budget, and we're going to be swatting up between now and then.
Indeed. Take care, everybody. See ya.
Bye.